And Kayla
来点温暖吧。
你知道世界上最温暖
unfortunate good
leaders have moved on to Microsoft, to Stripe, to Tableau. Does that concern you?
Well, actually, retention has been very good. If you mentioned the senior leaders, if you look at the VP plus ranks, the VP and above ranks at Amazon, the average tenure is over a decade, over 10 years. So that's actually very, very strong retention. So of course, you're always going to have some level of people coming and people going, and at the end of the day, that's actually healthy for the business. You want new perspectives to come in, of course, in the right proportion.
Amazon has opened an investigation after 550 employees supported a petition claiming a culture of discrimination, harassment, bullying, and bias. What's the status of this?
Well, we are incredibly focused, and I personally believe it's incredibly important to really have a very diverse, inclusive and equitable environment. And we're going to make sure that whatever it takes that we've got that. So we believe that we're really doing a lot of things to deliver on that. And we've got a lot of innovative efforts around bringing in a diverse workforce, which we have to have both because we're going to serve our customers best. They're diverse. We have to match that diversity. And also, I just believe it's our responsibility and it's the right thing to do. Anytime there is any possibility that things are not, something has not gone the way we want it to, we're going to investigate it thoroughly. That's what we're in the middle of doing in this case, and we'll make sure that we're operating in a way that's consistent with our values, and that's always the only goal.
If you could rewind to the early 2000s, the earliest days of AWS, is there anything you would have done differently to build an inclusive culture, to start with a more inclusive culture, to make sure that it didn't become a boys' club?
Well, I don't think that's what we have. I think that we do have a really fun, exciting, innovation-led, and inclusive culture. And that being said, these are hard problems. I think we've done a lot, but we are nowhere close to where we need to be. We're going to be restless and dissatisfied with our progress on DE&I, just as we are with every other part of our business.
Mark Zuckerberg is making a big bet on the metaverse. How big do you think it's going to be?
It's such an interesting sentence. The metaverse is real.
AWS has the biggest trove of sensitive corporate data in the world. I'm curious how you think about the balance between data and privacy and freedom and civil liberties in the modern era. I mean, there are governments, there are nation states around the world that want that information. Hackers and criminals want that information.
Well, we're very clear to start with that our first job is security. We often say security is job zero. It was on the first page of our operating plan pretty much every year that I can remember.
But what about when governments request that information, or subpoena that information?
Sure. Well, we are very clear that our customers' data is their data. So the data belongs to our customers, and not everybody operates that way. We are not going to look at customers' data. We are not going to compete against our customers using their data. Their data is their data. And furthermore, we have all sorts of architectural best practices that our customers should be and are using for any sensitive data. And so a lot of that really relies around encryption. And so we've built a lot of different encryption capabilities so that any sensitive data, which could leak for any reason, be it to a government, be it to a hacker, be it to anyone else, any form of security breach, that it's encrypted and useless to anybody else. Given the broad array of encryption solutions that we provide, it's actually very doable and powerful for our customers to safeguard their data that way.
Mark Zuckerberg is making a big bet on the metaverse. Is AWS going to have a role in the metaverse?
I think AWS already has a big role in the metaverse. So I think the cloud enables the metaverse. So if you think about all of the compute capacity, all of the storage, all of the machine learning which is required to create compelling and delightful end user experiences in the metaverse, a lot of that is already today running on AWS. So if you take Epic Games, for example, so Epic runs Fortnite, massively popular game, 350 million users worldwide, and Epic runs almost everything on AWS, from the back-end servers to the analytics and everything in between. So I think that's a great example of the metaverse at work, and all that's happening today on AWS. And we anticipate that's only going to grow really rapidly in the future.
How big do you think it's going to be?
It's such an interesting sentence. The metaverse is real, and yet it's virtual at the same time. I think that if we continue to do what we've always done, which is to provide a technology platform that allows organizations to transform, then these gaming and entertainment and social media and other companies will be able to do what they do best, which is to focus on innovating on behalf of their end users. And I think that the metaverse and many other areas will be rich with invention.
So this next conversation will happen in the spheres, in the metaverse. That's where we'll next meet. How about that?
That could be. I'll meet you in the metaverse.
All right, see you there. Now, I know that climate change, and stopping climate change, and your data center footprint is a big passion of yours. How fast will Amazon's data centers get to carbon neutral?
Amazon is already the largest purchaser of renewable energy in the world. And we intend to be 100% renewable energy by the year 2025. We had originally said 2030. We actually accelerated that by 5 years to 2025. And that's part of our broader climate pledge that Amazon created, and to which we've now gotten 200 other organizations to sign on to. And the climate pledge is to be net zero carbon by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Accord target. Yeah. So we know how to do some of that. Other part are going to require invention, but we really look forward to it, and I think it's one of the most important things we can do for our generation.
Amazon counts some of the biggest oil and gas producers as its customers. Isn't that a contradiction? Should you be kicking them off your platforms? Those
customers are trying to get to sustainable business models which rely on new energy sources. And so many of those customers are figuring out how do they get to wind, how do they get to solar, how do they get into batteries, all new business models relying on renewable energy. And I think rather than abandoning them and having them maybe dig in more on fossil fuels, if we can enable them to move faster, to be more innovative, and to be more agile in figuring out new business models, new technical solutions, experimenting, failing fast, and moving on to the next idea, then the whole world will get to the renewable energy solutions that we need. At this year's reInvent conference, it'll be the first time that Andy Jassy is not giving the keynote. Mm-hmm. You will be. Give us a preview. What can we expect to hear? I think we're going to have a lot of really exciting announcements. So I think across our service portfolio, you'll see that. We have a lot of exciting partner announcements. The partner ecosystem still remains, to this day, so important to what AWS is doing, and we have some great announcements lined up for that. And then I think people are going to want to see that we're making it easier and easier for them to consume the cloud and to work with AWS. And so we're going to continue to, in addition to building more powerful basic capabilities, we're going to continue to make it easier and easier in a variety of ways to interact with AWS.
Adam Selipsky, CEO of AWS, thank you so much for joining us.
Bloomberg has enhanced
before
going out and buying clothes. They saved their money and bought property and outside of the city generally. People are moving to the suburbs, to rural areas, places where home prices are a little bit cheaper.
many home buyers are looking for houses outside the major metropolitan areas. Additionally, many home buyers are looking for direct outdoor access and added space as the uncertainty about the virus persists.
Millennials are also looking to influencers not just for the latest trends and TikTok dances, but to partake in important conversations, be it about politics or personal finance or anything in between.
Real estate ownership. Let's start small. Let's don't be scared to start small. Instead of renting a big house in the hills in California like most artists do, buy you one that's on the flat.
I meet folks like Brandon Rule and Charlemagne the God.
You have residential real estate and you have commercial real estate.
They're talking about buying homes. When I was coming up, really home buying was a mysterious, shrouded process that only a few people could teach me. Now I can easily log on to Clubhouse or Instagram and find literally lessons on how to purchase a home, but done with savvy and finesse.
Today we're gonna make a greenhouse.
I am DIYing the entire closet.
Heather, having bought her fixer-upper sight unseen, also looked to internet personalities to help figure out how to modernize and to make sure her home was also an investment.
It gave us a lot of confidence. They make it look super easy how we could do all of those things ourselves. My husband just installed a laundry chute, which is something we never would have thought of if we didn't see an influencer do that and how easy it actually is.
Really simple do-it-yourself project. You can do that. If you have any questions, go ahead and message me.
And in the case of Neville House, Josh and Pele hope that buyers see these homes as potential secondary income.
These young families look at these products or look at our homes and say, here's a turnkey Airbnb. This can serve our family, but this can also be the perfect rental. We've tried to strike a balance in the design of the home for working well as a family home that's going to be lived in and also working as an investment.
A lot of this just points to how millennials can utilize and leverage social media to their benefit. But it also speaks to, again, this moment that folks want freedom. So millennials are really stepping up to this real estate game and taking ownership and building wealth.
Of course, not everything is as it seems online. While social media can be a useful tool for learning, there's still a lot it can't tell you about the home buying experience, or living in the suburbs for that matter.
We knew going into it, budgeting for a lot of renovations. We kind of thought if we buy it at $450,000, we could put $200,000-300,000 into the house and really make it ours and our own.
We can't wait to replace in this kitchen and update our built-in deep fryer, which was not in the listing photos.
We kind of got into the house and we realized that budget was completely unrealistic.
We have a lot of people who see our design on Instagram and they say, I love it, can you come build this on my property? And then they'll send us the lot, which they bought sight unseen during COVID, and because of site conditions or zoning, it's virtually unbuildable.
I think we all know that what you see on Instagram and what you see in real life are two very different things. So while we can definitely, as brokers, create these fantastic narratives, the one recommendation that I would give is do your homework. Don't believe everything you say. That's not to say that there's dishonesty or anything where people are trying to manipulate you, but not everything you see is accurate.
This shift towards social media house hunting may also help to bring equilibrium to a market that has historically disadvantaged specific groups of buyers.
Many of the traditional ways that people got mortgages or loans often precluded Black people because they deemed us too risky for those loans. With technology, there's ways to get around that. As long as more Black people get educated on racism and discrimination in lending, we're going to figure out ways to get around that racism.
When I was 24 years old, I saw the UFC on a pay-per-view on TV, and I was so overwhelmed by the athleticism, the skill. And then at the end of the fight, the combatants hugged, they shook hands, and I just fell in love with it.
Part of UFC's appeal is it doesn't look like a balletic display of martial talent and mastery as much as it looks like a bar fight.
We choose to do this because we love the sport, but it is a business. And if you do not treat it like a business, I guarantee you that the promoter is, and you will be left broken at the end of your career.
Each of us have an individual story, but as with anything, you take enough of these individual stories and you see not only crossover, but intersectionality.
A group of former UFC fighters that are suing the UFC scored a key legal victory on Thursday when a federal judge said he would grant their lawsuit class action status.
There have been fights in every major U.S. sport about workers' power in the labor market.
I don't think there's a guy in the sport, from the guy who just got
and augmented reality.
Has some catching up to do, but you won't hear Pat Brown knocking his biggest competitor.
I wish them nothing but success. They have the same mission we have. The only rival we care about is the incumbent animal-based industry.
Rivals or not, Impossible and Beyond certainly agree on one thing. The true prize isn't the American market, it's China. 27% of the world's meat is consumed in China, compared to just 9% in the US.
The Chinese population eats a ton of meat. They're a huge market. China's a really interesting case because they have long had vegetarian cuisine as part of their culinary culture, and whether they are looking for meat replacements is still an open question. What we found in our reporting is that some consumers are excited about them. It's just, we don't know if it's going to be enough.
To improve its prospects, Impossible is developing a plant-based replacement for pork.
Globally, pork is the most widely consumed meat. It's almost 40% of all the meat consumed globally. #1 in Europe, #1 in China. So if we're going to achieve our mission, pork is, right up there.
No word yet on when Impossible pork will be available.
This morning, growing concerns about the nation's food supply.
From butchers to national supermarkets, supplies now limited and prices rising.
The impact of the coronavirus on the price and availability of meat has given a boost to companies like Impossible Foods. Over the 4 weeks ending April 19th, sales of plant-based meat increased. But Impossible has acknowledged some negative effects from the pandemic as well.
This being a product that has primarily been served in restaurants, they took a pretty big hit with all the food service shutdowns, although the company doesn't want to say, how much of a hit. They have, however, announced some new retail rollouts. Recently, they announced that they're going to be rolling out with Kroger supermarkets, and that's big. That's great for them. The question of whether this is like a long-term sea change for these companies, I don't know. Just have to wait and see.
It's safe to say Impossible stands a slim chance of achieving its goal of replacing the entire meat industry. But it's early days for the science of plant-based meat, and it's not impossible that these products could one day contribute to a greener, more humane future. In the meantime, as the technology improves, we get to look forward to many more years of this.
This is meat.
Wait,
no, this is impossible.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
This is the meat burger. I like it better.
It's not even close to a veggie burger or a tofu burger or anything like that. It's very, very much.
Gwadar is a strategically important point on the map of Pakistan. It sits very close to Iran, actually, on the very southern coast. It's about a 10-hour drive west of Karachi, but it's only about an hour drive to Iran. The area is extremely poor. It's very arid. It doesn't have enough water. Electricity has been very spotty. One of the most surprising things about visiting Gwadar is the high degree of security that is absolutely everywhere. There are armed guards that are required to escort foreign visitors everywhere you go because it is a contested region, because there have been militant attacks in the past.
Despite all this, Gwadar is a key part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, also known as CPEC, the crown jewel of President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative.
We will leave no stone unturned in ensuring that CPEC and all the projects under its umbrella are materialized in time and in full.
So far, just 1/3 of all CPEC projects have been completed. In Gwadar, none of them have been, and the promised improvements for local people like job creation and better infrastructure have not materialized. So, what has China got to gain from developing this seemingly obscure city on the Pakistani coast?
We have seen this movie before. An outside power comes into Pakistan. It spends heavily on big infrastructure projects. China's not the first to do it. Right after Pakistan became independent in the late 1940s, early 50s, 50s, the U.S. was sending advisors into Pakistan to help plant's economy. The U.S. was doing infrastructure projects there too.
Those early projects helped the US gain Pakistan as an ally against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The US has provided about $80 billion in aid to Pakistan since its independence, but overall the result is disappointing. One of the recent attempts was in the late 2000s as part of the US effort to combat terrorism in Afghanistan.
The number one item on that aid package was to build these high visibility infrastructure projects. So there are literally projects that the United States tried to do or Pakistan proposed to the United States in the 2000s during that period that have become Belt and Road projects.
China is stepping into a gap which has been left by retreating ambition from the US.
为“一带一路”建设美好的未来，为各国发展繁荣干杯。
The Belt and Road Initiative is China's President Xi Jinping's signature foreign policy initiative. Launched in 2013, it comprises an overland belt stretching through China, Central Asia into Europe, and a maritime road stretching around Southeast Asia through the Indian Ocean and up past East Africa. So a benign way of characterizing China's Belt and Road Initiative would be infrastructure for influence.
So when Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative, shortly afterwards China designated Pakistan as its showcase flagship project. So the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was going to be the biggest and most important showcase for the success of the Belt and Road. Pakistan is in great need of infrastructure development. They wanted to create a railway, a highway, roads, all kinds of economic development that is intended to help Pakistan. And it's meant to provide jobs, 2.3 million jobs for Pakistanis. It's meant to provide a 2.5% boost to GDP growth.
And China would gain economically as well. CPEC was intended to reduce oil and gas routes from the Middle East by thousands of miles, a way to cut overland into Western China instead of going around Southeast Asia by ship. Projects in Pakistan also provide Chinese state-owned companies with an additional market. Chinese workers are brought to Pakistan to build infrastructure and then take wages home. CPEC is also strategically significant for China and Pakistan. China wants to strengthen this relationship to counter their shared rival India.
CPEC is both an instrument of Chinese power as well as a test of Chinese power. If it succeeds, China will be demonstrating that it's able to do what great powers have not been able to do in Pakistan, including the United States.
Which is why Gwadar is so important. It's in Pakistan's Balochistan province, an area with serious electricity and water shortages.
Balochistan province is actually populated by people who are of Baloch origin. They're a different ethnicity. They speak a different language from the majority in power in Islamabad. And they feel, as the poorest province in Pakistan, they have not sufficiently benefited from some of the economic achievements that the rest of Pakistan has had. That area is quite contested by the Balochistan Liberation Army, the people who feel that even Pakistani people have encroached into their territory. So quite a number of people are still staging attacks, and they attacked the biggest international hotel in Gwadar, shot up the lobby and killed, I think, 5 people.
But this unsettled city is where the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is supposed to lead to. Authorities plan to develop Gwadar into an international port city.
Gwadar port has an interesting history and an interesting location too. It's located in Balochistan. It's about 120 kilometers from Iran. Pakistan purchased this territory from Oman, I think in the 1950s. And so for a long time, Pakistan has had on its agenda trying to develop this area. Since the 70s, it's wanted to build a port in Gwadar. Actually approached the United States in the 1970s and tried to convince the Nixon administration to pay for a port. Even offered naval access if the United States was willing to pay for that.
The US rejected Pakistan's offer, concerned that the port would not be commercially viable and would cause geopolitical tension. But in the early 2000s, a Chinese company was awarded the contract to build the port, and they completed phase 1 of construction in 2006. The port was then managed by a Singaporean government entity. In 2013, a Chinese port operator took over from the Singaporeans. In 2015, China announced that it will expand the port as part of the CPEC initiative, but 5 years later, little has happened.
When you look out at the port, you can see it has only 3 berths, and all of them were empty. And the only ship that was in the port at the time was a Pakistan naval frigate. And so it indicated to me that the port is not particularly operational for commercial purposes, and a number of analysts have talked about the strategic importance in a military sense if eventually China were able to use the port of Gwadar as a military base.
No one would be surprised if China did use it in that way. I don't think in the short term, like it is set up in Djibouti, where it has a permanent base. I think it's more likely to use it as almost like a sort of forward-based resupply option, something it can use when it wants to.
Other projects, like building Pakistan's largest airport in Gwadar and 2 special economic zones, have been delayed. A 19-kilometre highway linking the port with the Makran Coastal Highway in Balochistan is under construction too.
Most of the people who live there and work there already are fishermen. They rely on access to the sea. The way that the express highway from the port was originally proposed would have cut off their sea access, and so that was a real point of contention with the community. There have been some proposals to allow them an underpass. It's still a little bit unclear how that is finally going to be resolved.
Even if those projects are eventually built, there are serious questions about who will work there.
There is a problem with manpower, of course, in Gwadar. It's a very small city, and so one proposal has been, well, we'll just ship Chinese workers in from China and build lots of fancy housing for them.
The first Chinese-built community in Pakistan, a $500 million development spanning over 10 million square feet, with over 60% open spaces.
That kind of proposal is what makes a lot of the Pakistani local people quite upset.
A Gwadar-based journalist expressed concerns to Bloomberg over projects like this. The journalist spoke anonymously for fear of persecution from the Pakistan government.
These projects are creating jobs, but they're not really creating jobs for the local people of Gwadar. They're not against economic prosperity, but they're against the development that leaves them behind.
Pakistan doesn't have the money to build these projects. It's gone to the IMF for its 13th bailout since the 1980s. By engaging in CPEC projects, the government of Pakistan has incurred more debts from China, not only posing challenges for Pakistan, but possibly the international community if Pakistan eventually defaults on its debts. But CPEC is still set to go on. Even if most current projects haven't been completed, the 2 countries have recently signed new projects worth $11 billion. Pakistan's Prime Minister said the country's economic future is linked with China.
It's hard to imagine how the China-Pakistan economic corridor is going to be the game changer that the Pakistan government would like it to be. We're not seeing the economic growth or benefit from the projects that were set out and we're supposed to have seen by now. We're not seeing the job creation.
Project delays, accumulating debts, commercial viability. These problems of CPEC are also typical of Belt and Road projects around the world.
For China, though, it's never the narrow accounting perspective that matters. It's the bigger strategic benefits. As China's dollars continue to flow, as China's concrete continues to pour, China's influence continues to increase.
there was some degree of runaway expectations. I think there was also some degree that they weren't extremely forthcoming with the state of the game.
The Cyberpunk 2077 story is very much kind of a story of everything that can and will go wrong in game development.
What is this bug? Jackie's AI flipped out. It wasn't there before.
Where's my gun?
Keep her steady.
I can't shoot.
The release of Cyberpunk 2077 in December of 2020 will go down as one of the most disastrous game launches in history, and it instantly rewrote the narrative of its celebrated developer, CD Projekt Red.
Larger studios with bigger budgets weren't able to create the same quality of open-world game.
The inside story of the making of Cyberpunk depicts a process marred by unchecked ambition, unrealistic timelines, and a focus on marketing at the expense of development.
When CD Projekt stock was at its high, it was the largest stock in the Polish stock market.
Cyberpunk was supposed to be the biggest game of 2020. This was a game that was starring Keanu Reeves. This was a game that was from the makers of The Witcher 3. This was supposed to be the big tentpole release of last year. And for it to become such a disaster for so many people, I think will have pretty far-reaching consequences.
CD Projekt's origins are somewhat unique in the games industry. In the West and Japan, the late 80s and 90s were dominated by games for the home console market, and characters like Mario and Sonic the Hedgehog were becoming household names. The same was not true in a post-Soviet and economically depressed Poland. Most gaming was done on PCs, and most games were copied and sold in small markets around the country.
You could go to the market down the street in Warsaw and buy and sell CDs, and these two guys, Marcin Nowinski and Michal Kaczynski, decided they were going to start selling CDs, and they wound up striking a deal with the people who made a game called Baldur's Gate, which was kind of like the seminal role-playing game in the late 90s.
It was never a business, it was kind of lifestyle, so we're actually pretty bad with counting money.
So you can kind of think of it almost like Nike, you know, where Phil Knight was selling shoes out of the trunk of his car. You know, you can kind of think about it the same way. It was, you know, just selling physical goods and then evolving that into a much broader enterprise.
CD Projekt, named for selling CDs, would move on from just reselling games to localizing Western and Japanese-made games into the Polish language. But it wasn't until 2002 that the company would make its own game, The Witcher.
The Witcher is a huge series, huge fantasy series in Poland, and so it was a pretty big deal that these guys got the rights to make the video games.
The Witcher book series is a source of national pride in Poland, and as CD Projekt released The Witcher 2, the video game series would become an important economic symbol for Poland as well.
CD Projekt Red had become this behemoth of an institution in Poland, and they were really big in the Polish technology scene because they were getting more worldwide attention than most Polish companies do, and making a lot of money. And in 2011, when Barack Obama came to visit Poland, the Prime Minister actually gave him a copy of The Witcher 2.
I confess I'm not very good at video games, but I've been told that it is a great example of Poland's place in the new global economy.
But it would be the launch of The Witcher 3 in 2015 that would elevate CD Projekt Red from representing the best of Poland to representing the best of the games industry.
I mean, really, the thing people look for first and foremost, I think, is that the game is just good, and Witcher 3 was just a phenomenal game. There's a level of just storytelling, an emphasis on making every side quest count, on top of the atmosphere, the dialogue, the character interactions, the different ways stories can end. They nail that.
Other open world games felt empty and forced, and the developers of them gave excuses as to why there couldn't be more rich story or interactions. And The Witcher 3 blew them out of the water. CD Projekt Red was beloved. They were seen as a studio that was willing to make what the player wanted and to truly put in the love and effort required to make a high quality game that really connects with the people playing with it.
And the winner for Game of the Year 2015 is The Witcher 3.
The Witcher 3 would go on to win over 250 Game of the Year awards, but along with being a critical success, for CD Projekt, it was also a financial success. Estimates put the sales of Witcher 3 at around 28 million copies in 2019. A huge step up considering by 2014, The Witcher and The Witcher 2 had only combined to sell 8 million copies. And with two large expansions for The Witcher 3, CD Projekt also helped separate themselves from other AAA publishers at the time.
And the game award goes to, oh man, I have to pay a microtransaction to unlock. That's so stupid that this has to, hold on, I got this, guys, here we go.
Other games, and the most notorious, one to do this was EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2. They got really aggressive on microtransactions in a game that already cost at least $60. You could have paid more if you bought the premium editions. But not only was it that they were being very aggressive and trying to get you to spend money, but you could actually get items that helped you win. Well, gamers kind of draw the line in the sand there, and they don't like that.
CD Projekt had done this phenomenal job of marketing themselves as a gamer-friendly company.
We've said this a million times, and I'll say it again. We're gamers, first of all, and we all like to be treated fairly. So it only makes sense that as developers, we apply the same principle to everything we do here at CD Projekt Red. So giving everyone a bunch of free DLC was an absolutely no-brainer.
They said, we're not going to sell you DLC that's like horse armor packs and other nonsense. We're going to just give you free stuff, and then we're going to sell big expansions as part of The Witcher 3.
And not only were they really good, they were offered at a fair price.
And this was a company that was seen as just like a company that really cared about quality and cared about its customers and would not do anything to kind of screw fans over the way that fans see that EA and Activision and all the other big publishers do.
With a critically and financially successful game, as well as the goodwill from the gaming audience, all the focus would shift to CD Projekt's next release, Cyberpunk 2077.
It's actually funny. They first announced it through like a press release, and then they showed off a trailer at the beginning of 2013 that was like the CGI trailer of like a woman, and there was all sorts of cool cyberpunk stuff, flying cars, lots of stuff. But it wasn't really until after The Witcher 3 that Cyberpunk began really like building up this feverish level of hype.
CD Projekt Red, though, wouldn't put out another trailer for Cyberpunk until 2018 at the E3 trade show.
And they showed off it was like a 2-minute trailer of Cyberpunk. Looked pretty rad. And then they showed behind the scenes for E3 attendees, for press and anyone else who could get score an appointment in there. They showed this 45-minute demo, and it blew people away.
Welcome to the gameplay demo walkthrough of CD Projekt Red's upcoming title, Cyberpunk 2077. The gameplay you're about to see is
商业化现象啊，所以这边我们就要去处理这个问题，对不对？哈，这东西就我们快速带过，因为以前已经讲过了。好，Algorithmic 这种现象就是说它有
方受了一个均匀的压力嘛，所以在这样子正立方体受这样压力的情况下，我在3个方向的应变一定是相同的，所以我们就把它写成3 0，我们以一个符号1来表示。我们把这样子的式子带到上面这3个来，那又由于我现在讲了，我3个方向的应力值都相同嘛，所以这些都可以写成 P， 都可以写成 P， 都可以写成 P。带进来以后，你会发现最后这个1就会等于 3P 乘上1减2 epsilon 除上 Young's Modulus， 移项一下可以得到 P 就等于1这个小写的1乘上 Young's Modulus 除上3乘上1减2 Poisson Ratio， 这是我们最后算出来的这个压力 P。那这边大家不难发现的事情是，在这个压力的表示式里面，分母有一项叫做1减2乘上 Poisson Ratio。你们可以想一下，意思是当我的 Poisson Ratio 等于 0.5 的时候，分母就会是0，分母是0，这个 P 就会是无穷大。这样子的意思是，当我的 Poisson Ratio 等于 0.5 的时候，即使我外加的压力大到了无穷大，这个 P 等于无穷大的时候，我还是完全没办法改变我的体积，对吗？E 跟这个 delta V 是相关的嘛，所以我们称这样子的材料有另外一个名称叫做不可压缩材料，大家应该蛮常听到吧？像软木塞这种东西就是所谓的不可压缩材料嘛，也就是当它受到再大的压力压下来的时候，它的体积都不会变化。所以这就是所谓的体积质缩问题。那其实这个 Poisson Ratio 也不用真的刚好等于 0.5， 甚至它等于 0.4849 等等，也就是一个接近于 0.5 的数值的时候，在数值运算上都容易产生一些 singular 的现象，造成问题不收敛，就是所谓的 volumetric locking。
那画面来到了这里，要跟大家解释的是有限元数法里面的体积质缩问题。那其实前面理论已经大概提到的事情是，我一个立方块如果我在四面八方给定一样压力的时候，那 不管压力给多大，我的体积都不会被压缩。简单的说，如果这个4个角，8个角上面都有节点的话，这些节点是感受不到任何的位移量的。那你没有这些位移量，你就很难去算出，因为你根本侦测不到里面的应力应变值是多少。所以在这样一般的元素之下，其实它的变量是不足以去解决这样子的问题的。但即使没有遇到这个情况，可能你的压力不是如此的均匀，或者是你的 Poisson 不是刚好等于0.5的时候，其实它这边也会遇到一个元素过硬的现象。所以这边讲的是，使用全积分元素处理不可压缩材料的时候，很容易就会产生体积滞锁的现象。那常见到的是像超弹性材料，因为超弹性材料的 Poisson 几乎都是接近0.5的，或至少都0.4以上的几率很高了，那它会造成不收敛。在英文上叫 locking， 那中文上我们叫滞锁嘛，因为之后可能还会跟大家解释一个叫做简历滞锁问题，那英文叫做 shear locking。那不管你现在听到这个 locking 跟这个滞锁问题，都不要想成它是锁住了不能动的那种感觉，不是，是有点像元素过硬的这种描述。这个过硬的意思就是像所谓的刚度矩阵比你应该要有的来的更大。那像这里啊，你想想看，如果我今天每一块元素都是不可压缩的状况，也就是它体积就是不会变的情况，你就可以可想而知是，我每一个的变化，每个元素的变化跟邻近的元素之间都会彼此有一个很大的牵引力作用，让你彼此束缚的更紧。本来该变形的变成不能变形的，所以你可以在看到这些元素的交接处的部分，都有一些不该有的应力跟应变产生。这就是在有限元素法里面常会遇到的状况。这边讲各种应力状况都可能发生体积滞锁的现象，包含平面应变啊、3D 啊，或者是轴对称模型都有。但这边特别讲是，如果你今天是平面应力的假设之下，不会产生体积滞锁问题。在 ANSYS 里面呢，提供一个 Enhanced Strength Formulation， 它是透过增加一个自由度的方式来处理不可压缩材料的。那我们又称它为相容模式啊。你们可以想象一下，不管你的 shape function 是1阶还是2阶，就是你的元素上的边是直线或者可以弯曲的线，它在2个元素之间的边都必须是贴合，你可以一起往上弯，一起往下弯，或者贴平都没关系，但它就是贴合在一起的。那你用了这个 Enhanced Strength Formulation 之后呢，它可以产生所谓的间隙，或者是有重叠的行为。那没有的话，就必须像这样贴在一起嘛。那这样的好处是，如果彼此的元素之间束缚的太紧密的时候，它可以透过这个间隙或者是重叠的状况，来将这样的滞锁问题给它放松掉，就不会造成元素过硬的情形。OK， 那今天对于体积滞锁问题的讲解就到这边，下次再见啦，拜。的时候，它可以透过这个间隙或者是重叠的状况，来将这样的滞锁问题给它放松掉，就不会造成元素过硬的情形。OK。那今天对于体积滞锁问题的讲解就到这边，下次再见啦，拜。欢迎来到詹姆斯学院，我是森牛。上礼拜呢，跟大家谈了关于跟大家提的是简历滞锁与。那我们先来想，假设在材料力学里面，那我们给一个病施一个 pure bending 的时候，会发生怎样的力学现象 ？OK， 那大家应该在材力里面会有听过一句话，叫做 plan remain plan，normal remain normal。对，这是我们对材力里面量变化以后的一个假定。好，以这个图来看，你就会看到这个中性轴跟这个垂直的平面呢，如果本来是垂直的话，在它经过弯曲之后，还是会维持一个垂直的夹角。OK， 所以在这个过程中，中性轴垂直的面会维持垂直，而且在 x 方向的应变呢，会沿 y 方向呈线性变化。也就是以这个图来讲，上面受压缩嘛，下面受拉伸，所以下面是一个张应力应变，上面是一个压应力应变。OK， 会呈现一个线性的变化。那由于这个夹角都维持90度，所以我的简应变应该要为0才对。这是真实在材料力学里面会看到的一个现象。那如果我们今天用一个2阶元素来模拟 pure bending 问题会怎么样呢？好，那如果大家不知道什么叫做1阶跟2阶元素，或者不了解全积分跟简积分的差异的人，可以先去看一下我们中文的完整教材里面的第5章网格控制法里面的内容。那如果你不知道在哪，我会把链接放在这里，可能影片的上方吧。如果我等一下看一下，如果有影片我不会放在影片里面，我就会放在简介，好不好 ？OK， 所以我先假定大家知道，之后可能也会出一集专门去讲1阶跟2阶元素，还有全积分跟简积分的问题。好，那2阶元素在这里，由于我这一个边跟这个元素的边是可以呈现曲线弯曲的，所以我一样可以让它在这个弯曲的过程中达到 normal remain normal。这个叫什么等参数线啊？这个等参数线跟这等参数线还是维持垂直嘛？这边也是，这边也是，这边也是。所以在这过程中，我的简应变是0没有错。OK， 再来看轴向的应变，这个等参数线有受到压缩变短了，这个等参数线有受到拉伸变长了。所以在过程中，它是受到张应力，它是受到压应力应变，所以也是有造成了线性变化的一个效果。OK， 大家可以去简单的想一下，就是这是积分点嘛，这4个叉叉是积分点。那你可以想象成积分点经过的2条线，如果角度有变化，它就会感受得到简应力、简应变。那如果这个积分点通过了这条直线有变长，就感受到张应力应变，或者有变短，就可以感受到这个方向的压应力跟压应变。OK， 所以在过程中，这个完全符合我们材料力学里面的理论，是没有问题的。但如果你用的是1阶元素，它就遇到了所谓的 shear locking 或者是 hourglass 的问题。我们先看1阶全积分元素会什么现象。1阶全积分在这里，由于我的 shape function 是1阶的，所以我这4个边虽然你受到一个 pure bending， 但它依然必须保持直线。OK， 它依然必须保持直线，不能做弯曲。那在这个过程中，就看到这个现象。这时候这2个等参出现的夹角不再是垂直，它会因此而弯曲。 OK， 但是这个线有变短，这个线有变长，所以它在 x 方向的应力应变还是可以随着厚度方向呈线性变化是没有问题。只是问题来了，简应变不为零，此现象会造成元素问题的。但如果你用的是一阶元素，它就会遇到了线有变长，就感受到张应力应变，或者有变短，就可以感受到这个方向的压应力跟压应变。OK， 所以在这过程中，这个完全符合我们材料力学里面的理论是没有问题的。但如果你用的是一阶元素，它就会遇到了所谓的 Viscoelastic 或者是 abaqus 的问题。我们先看一阶全积分元素会有什么现象。一阶全积分在这里，由于我的 shape function 是一阶的，所以我这4个边虽然你受到一个 pure bending， 但它依然必须保持直线。OK， 它依然必须保持直线，不能做弯曲。那在这个过程中，就看到这个现象。这时候这2个等参数线的夹角不再是垂直，它会因此而弯曲。OK， 但是这个线有变短，这个线有变长，所以它在 x 方向的应力应变还是可以随着厚度方向呈线性变化是没有问题。只是问题来了，简应变不为零，此现象会造成元素过硬，称为简力质锁。会造元素过硬的时候呢，要跟大家解释这个，我必须先跟大家解释一个关于应力的意义。那我常会问一些学生，就是压力，你觉得说压力这种词力，这是指外加施给它的嘛？而应力呢，这个施加在某一个面上一个3 MPa 的压力，这是指外加施给我们施加在物体上一个外加施，就是边虽然你受到一个 pure bending， 但它依然必须保持直线。OK， 它依然必须保持直线，不能做弯曲。那在这个过程中，就看到这个现象。这时候这2个等参数线的夹角不再是垂直，它会因此而弯曲。OK， 但是这个线有变短，这个线有变长，所以它在 x 方向的应力应变还是可以随着厚度方向呈线性变化是没有问题。只是问题来了，简应变不为零，此现象会造成元素过硬，称为简力质锁。我操，到底差太大的差异的某一个面指的是外力变一个相反的应力，你把它放开那一瞬间，它就弹回去嘛。对吧？所以在这一题里面，当我不应该有简应力应变产生，却产生了的时候，我就多了一个去抵抗外在变化的能力，所以它会变更硬，让你外力更难去让它产生变化。OK， 所以我们这时候会造成元素过硬的现象，称为简力质锁。好，那你可以看到这张图，就是在这些交界处的面呢，其实都不应该有这些集中的应力应变产生的，但就是因为简力质锁的关系，所以产生的这些色块，就代表它产生了 Viscoelastic 的状况。先来看一下 abaqus， 也就是沙漏化。刚刚讲了，我们如果在一阶全积分的时候遇到 Viscoelastic 的问题，所以你就想说，那我们就用一阶减积分就好了。那我们就来看一下一阶解积分会有什么情况。好，一阶解积分的时候呢，这一条线跟这条线这2条等参数线一样是维持垂直，没有错。OK， 所以不会有多余的简应力或简应变产生，所以刚刚 Viscoelastic 问题不在了。但是问题来了，现在上面这2条线，我不管变，也就是沙漏化。刚刚讲了，我们如果在一阶全积分的时候遇到 Viscoelastic 的问题，所以你就想说，那我们就用一阶减积分就好了。那我们就来看一下一阶解积分会有什么情况。好，一阶解积分的时候呢，这一条线跟这条线这2条等参数线一样是维持垂直，没有错。OK， 所以不会有多余的简应力或简应变产生，所以刚刚Viscoelastic问题不在了。但是问题来了，现在上面这2条线，我不管变化到多弯 ，OK， 因为中间的等参数线只有一条，一开始讲过了，这一条能伸长或缩短才能感受到 x 方向的应力应变。但我这个红线不管弯到多弯，这条都一样长，所以完了，我的 x 方向的应力应变都是0。你会说，不管是刚刚这题这张图，或这题这张图，那这都是一个非常简化的图。我一般的模型不会长这么规则，或者可能甚至交杂一些四面体人数，没有错。所以这其实把它想象成一个很夸张，因为以理论上来讲，其实你这里不管给到的力量多大，它是不会有任何一点点应力产生的。但事实上，当然不会这么简化，所以它还是会有相关的现象出现，只是不会这么夸张而已。所以我们这只是沙漏库这些问题的时候，你就会容易产生沙漏化。实际上的情形就下面这些图了。现在看这个可能是对单点受力嘛，那这可能是有单点的边界条件，这时候就会产生这种非常像沙漏的这种形状。那很难避免，如果是单点施力的话，所以这时候请你就使用2阶元素来做。OK， 那今天的
健达缤纷乐。
你有想过成为
from a work-in-progress version of the game. Everything you see is potentially subject to change.
Holy this, if they can live up to what they showed me, it's game over.
It all looked incredibly impressive. They had enough action, enough narrative beats with just the right amount of tension. They touted how each of these NPCs, there are thousands of them, each one with their own daily routines and everything.
We've greatly enhanced our crowd and community systems to create the most believable city in any open-world game to date.
So yeah, people were certainly blown away by this demo. It won E3 awards, and just people left the theater just in awe. What they didn't know, of course, is that the demo was completely fake.
Fake demos are common at E3. Studios put together builds of games to show off what they intend the game to be like, rather than the actual state of the game. What was unique about this demo was that it was impressively long.
It kind of plays into this idea that CD Projekt is very much a marketing-driven company, and so demos were really, really important to them. So it was really important that they make this demo blow people away, which it did. But that might have come at the cost of some time they could have been spending on the game.
A year later, at E3 2019, fans would get another big surprise.
Whoa! No way! Oh, what? Please welcome Keanu Reeves.
The feeling of being there, of walking the streets of the future, is really going to be breathtaking. You're breathtaking! You're breathtaking!
The Cyberpunk trailers showed gorgeous cities, beautiful lighting, really cutting-edge technology when it comes to the rendering of the game itself. People were very excited to be immersed in this gorgeous cyberpunk world. They saw over 8 million pre-orders, which is a ridiculously large amount for any title to sell, let alone pre-sell.
And you saw the stock price start to go up and up and up and to the right, pretty much in a straight line. If you just look at the Polish stock market, like the WIG index, when CD Projekt stock was at its high, it was the largest stock in the index.
And that was around the time that they announced that the game would be coming in April of 2020. Behind the scenes, people were pretty shocked that they were saying April. I don't think a single person who worked on that game actually thought they had a chance of coming out in April of 2020. So in April of 2019, I published an article for Kotaku about the making of a game called Anthem, which was a game from BioWare that was disastrous in many ways, and the article kind of ran through why that was. And afterwards, I started hearing from other developers who had stories to share that they said sounded a whole lot like Anthem's. The deadline is unrealistic, the direction keeps changing, things are floundering, we're going through a lot of problems. This sounds exactly like what you wrote about Anthem. Around that same time, perhaps coincidentally, I heard from the CEO of CD Projekt Red who wanted to reach out to me specifically to talk about crunch.
CD Projekt Red had a reputation for crunch, especially during the development of Witcher 3.
Their management wanted them to have a reputation for treating workers well and not forcing them to go through crunch. So Marcin Nowinski, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of CD Projekt Red, came to me and said, hey, I want to make a vow right now that we're not going to force anybody to crunch, that people will not have to work mandatory overtime on this project.
Over the course of reporting, Bloomberg has conducted interviews with more than 20 current and former CD Projekt staff, most of whom requested anonymity so as not to risk their careers. CD Projekt declined to comment on the process or provide interviews for this story. The company would end up delaying the game 3 different times, first pushing from an April 2020 release to September, then November, and once again to December 2020. In order to meet the deadline, the studio would scale down the size of Cyberpunk's main city, as well as canceling some features. And while those measures helped, developers still said they were under significant crunch, including one former audio programmer who claimed to work up to 13 hours a day, 5 days a week, and stating he had seen friends who had lost their families over this.
This was not a big secret in the
programmer who claimed to work said 2020. Staff, most of whom requested anonymity so as not to risk their careers. CD Projekt declined to comment on the process or provide interviews for this story. The company would end up delaying the game 3 different times, first pushing from an April 2020 release to September, then November, and once again to December 2020. In order to meet the deadline, the studio would scale down the size of Cyberpunk's main city, as well as canceling some features. And while those measures helped, developers still said they were under significant crunch, including one former audio programmer who claimed to work up to 13 hours a day, 5 days a week, and stating he had seen friends who had lost their families over this.
This was not a
and stating he had seen friends who had lost their families over this.
This was not a big secret. Who had stories to share that they said sounded a whole lot like Anthem's. The deadline is unrealistic, the direction keeps changing, things are floundering, we're going through a lot of problems. This sounds exactly like what you wrote about Anthem. Around that same time, perhaps coincidentally, I heard from the CEO of CD Projekt Red who wanted to reach out to me specifically to talk about crunch.
CD Projekt Red had a reputation for crunch, especially during the development of Witcher 3.
Their management wanted them to have a reputation for treating workers well and not forcing them to go through crunch. So Marcin Nowinski, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of CD Projekt Red, came to me and said, hey, I want to make a vow right now that we're not going to force anybody to crunch, that people will not have to work mandatory overtime on this project.
Over the course of reporting, Bloomberg has conducted interviews with more than 20 current and former CD Projekt staff, most of whom requested anonymity so as not to risk their careers. CD Projekt declined to comment on the process or provide interviews for this story. The company would end up delaying the game 3 different times, first pushing from an April 2020 release to September, then November, and once again to December 2020. In order to meet the deadline, the studio would scale down the size of Cyberpunk's main city, as well as canceling some features. And while those measures helped, developers still said they were under significant crunch, including one former audio programmer who claimed to work up to 13 hours a day, 5 days a week, and stating he had seen friends who had lost their families over this.
This was not a big secret in the office that the game was not going to be ready, but a similar sort of thing happened with The Witcher 3, and a similar sort of thing happens with a lot of games where they don't seem ready until suddenly everything just clicks. Some of the best games ever made, were created through this process. I don't know that it's the most efficient or the wisest way to make video games, but it's what a lot of people do. I think that management there has genuinely tried to change it, or at least said they wanted to change it, but it has proven very difficult to change that when you make games in this one specific way.
Game studios, some of them see crunch as part of their core culture, that All of their games that they've made under crunch have been successful, so it must be a core element to the magic recipe for creating good games. And that's really not the case. We've run studies and seen that at 8 weeks of working 60 hours plus, the output of a professional is the same as if they were working 40 hours a week. So chronic overwork degrades how effective someone is to the point where then it becomes negative, and overworking them is just getting you less and less productivity.
And so these guys, the people at CD Projekt, having made The Witcher 3, were kind of riding on that high, you could call it arrogance or confidence or whatever you want to call it, of having made The Witcher 3. And I think that, like, having a certain level of confidence can certainly be a good thing, but in this case it could also be dangerous because it kind of blinded them to the reality, which was that this game wasn't going to coalesce.
Sony Pictures Entertainment is reeling from what may be the biggest and most devastating computer hacking in Hollywood's history.
Hackers attacked in waves, first crippling Sony's internal systems, then leaking 5 Sony movies online.
Today, the U.S. government pointed the finger of blame directly at North Korea for the devastating cyber attack against Sony Pictures.
Sony pulling the plug on the interview, saying it will not show the controversial comedy about an assassination attempt on North Korea's leader.
The Sony Pictures hacking was taken very seriously because it was an attack on the free world. What we had been building in terms of our civilization and our freedom and our ability to exchange information freely had been disrupted by a country that we knew very little about.
North Korea has reportedly made attempts to steal COVID-19 vaccine technology by hacking pharmaceutical giant Pfizer.
The Justice Department has charged 3 North Korean hackers over a wide-ranging scheme that included the attempt theft of billions of dollars from multiple companies.
Despite so many attacks blamed on North Korea, there was not much known about the people behind the hacking attacks. And my aim was to reveal who these people are, what they are like, what their operations are like, and on what their dreams and fears were. My name is Sam Kim. I'm a reporter for Bloomberg News, and I wrote a story for Business Week about North Korean hackers. My story is about people who are sent from North Korea to countries like China to hack for the regime, spy on enemies, and make money. North Korea's cyber abilities began about in the 1970s with a lot of students going to countries like Russia, China, and even East Germany to learn coding. It was aimed at improving the productivity of factories at home. But in some time in the 1980s and 1990s, the current leader, Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, thought that it would be a good idea to develop a team, an army of people who could hack for North Korea's military. So they began this team of basically hackers who would spy for the North Korean regime and also go out there and make hard currency for the regime. I think Kim Jong-un takes the hacking ability more seriously than his father. He also enjoys a bit of tech savviness as well. You know, he's often shown traveling on his airplane where on the desk there's a Mac computer. He understands the importance of computers. He understands the importance of employing technology to improve productivity. of his economy. North Korea is an isolated country with its economy pretty much dilapidated nowadays. It's been under increasing pressure and sanctions from the US and the international community, basically. It does not have the resources and money to build the kind of conventional weapons that other countries are able to build. So what happens is North Korea concentrates its resources on building nuclear arms and missiles, which experts call basically asymmetrical weapons. It's the kind of weapons that gives North Korea an instant edge.
它有变形，可是却没有旋，好，所以它就会变成是过转的状况。阿甘就是个过转的状况。好，那这类情况其实看起来就像这样子，看起来就像这样。好，那除了以前我们说在厚度方向上面铺4层，那是因为 bending 问题啊，那是因为 bending 问题。可这里根本不是 bending 问题啊，好，这里不是 bending 问题哈。所以在不是 bending 问题的时候呢，如果你要解决这种 abaqus 现象的话，其实还有一些东西可以用。他这边告诉你的就是第一种就是如果你是集中力，你就想办法把它换成均布力，或者是让它多一点的。 的点来去承受这个力量。OK， 第二个就是你的 boundary condition 避免不要把它放在一个点。一个点上的那种 boundary condition， 就是你说你锁死一个点，尽量不要这样做，好，尽量不要这样做。而且真实的状况下，你要只锁一个点，到底是什么样的情形，我也不是很懂哈。好，所以不要单独只锁一个点。好，另外就是接触的时候不要只接触一个点 ，OK， 这些东西都是避免你发生 abaqus 的状况。那第4点就是以前我们说的，如果你是做 bending 问题，那就厚度方铺4层就可以了。那就会有人讲说，你希望用一阶全积分元素来避免 abaqus 的状况是可行的哈，是可行的。就是一阶全积分元素呢，的确不会 abaqus。好，那同时他们在做 stress gradation， 就是如果你的应力分布的梯度对你而言很重要的话，你可以用全积分元素来做，没有错。但是你就要避免，你就要知道说，当你使用全积分元素的时候，你一定要小心，它不能够拿去做 bending 啊，它不能够拿去做 bending， 因为它拿去做 bending 的时候呢，它就会有 Viscoelastic， 就会有 volumetric locking 哈，它对于剪力自锁以及对于那个体积自锁都处理的比较不好。好，所以你要想一下，你什么时候该用什么。那通常我们不太会去用它啦。好，所以Viscoelastic如果真的出现的时候，那这个时候你就会变成是你会发现你的东西太硬，好，就发现你的东西太硬。那另外一种就是 volumetric locking， 就是体积太硬，压不下去，不可压缩材料。好，那非常遗憾的事情是，以前我们在做 standard 的时候，不可压缩材料还有 hybrid formulation 可以用，可是 explicit 没有这件事情，所以它能够怎么处理？这个我就不多提了，因为这是以前讲那个 abaqus 的问题。abaqus 到哪里嘞 ？abaqus 到，等一下，我好像跳过 abaqus 还蛮多的。这个是跟零化的。所以不在这里，那我往后讲。那我找一下。好，没关系。总之呢，其实这段就是跟以前我们讲 abaqus 的东西是一样的，所以如果各位有兴趣的话，可以回去看你的那个基础训练课程的补充资料那一份，就是这一份全部的内容。好，那我这边就不讲。好，那现在要提的就是，刚刚那个 volumetric locking， 我看一下在哪里好。在这里，OK， 得了。先讲这个哈，如果你有体积 治所的问题的话，就是不可描述材料出现的时候呢，由于没有 hybrid formulation 这件事情可用，所以如果你在做 explicit code 的时候呢，通常就会假设永远都有 compressibility， 就它再怎么样都要可以压缩一点才对。好，那所以如果你在做的材料，尤其是 hyperelastic， 就是你做 hyperelastic， 那就很有可能是不可压缩材料。那你又没有告诉他 Poisson ratio 的时候，预设的 Poisson ratio 是0.475，对 ，Poisson ratio 0.5就是不可压缩材料嘛，好，0.5就是完全不可压缩，那就做不下去哈，就做不下去。OK， 所以 explicit code 里面呢不会让你打0.5这种数字哈，预设是0.475。那如果你要打一个你自己想要做的 Poisson ratio 的话呢，不可压缩材料最多建议你不要超过0.495。OK， 0.495是他建议的上限，好，建议的上限就到0.495就不要再上去了，就不要再上去了，很有可能会做不下去。OK， 这是解决体力治所带 explicit 的方法，因为没得选，因为没有 hybrid formulation 可以用。那当然，其实你用一阶元素已经比用二阶元素来的好，而且用紧积分元素哈，所以它其实已经来的比较好一点。好，那刚刚是跳过了。OK， 那现在我们讲最后这个是，元素里面呢，其实有一个你选元素的时候有一个特别的选项。在 standard 的问题不太确定有没有，应该是没有哈。在做 explicit code 的时候，你的元素里面有一个选项叫做 second order accuracy， 它在这里。这个选项的用途是什么？如果你的元素呢，对大部分的元素而言，其实你用 default 是够 ，default 就是 no， 好 ，default 就是 no， 就是一阶的精准度。OK， 那 second order accuracy 什么时候会用到？如果你的元素会旋转，而且转的圈数还非常多 ，OK， 超过5圈的话，second order accuracy 可以帮助你的精度增加，什么意思哈？这里有个例子长这样子，如果你有一个螺旋桨的样子长这样，你然后就一直旋转，然后你做一阶的 accuracy 跟2阶的 accuracy 去做比较的时候，你会发现在第5圈的时候，他们就会开始出现相位角差。OK， 所以如果你的问题里面呢是会遇到旋转的问题，那这时候你的元素在你做元素的那个 accuracy 的时候呢，会建议你就用2阶来做，会建议用2阶来做。好，类似的问题哈，为什么这种东西会在 explicit code 出现？因为 explicit code 里面呢 ，explicit 里面你的 stable time increment 非常小，它会计算非常多次。你可以想象一下，如果说你在4舍5入的过程当中，就是它没错，它会取很多小数位数，然后帮你留下很多资料。可是留下很多资料总是有极限的哈，小数位数后面会有极限。那你会有好几次的 increment，下来呢，你的4舍5入这件事情会让你的错，如果你有错误的话，这个错误就会不断累积。OK， 所以在 explicit code 里面，不只是 element 有 second order accuracy， 你的 step 你的 job 你在分析 job 的时候，其实也有一项是帮你开2阶。就是帮你开 full accuracy， 就是帮你开到2阶的那个精准度，让你算出来结果的误差不要一直延续下去。OK， 那东西后面会再提。理由都是因为你的 explicit code， 你的 increment 实在是太多了。好，这是第2章。Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 好 ，content 就不知道为什么上 explicit 的时候还是会讲 content， 就觉得有点鬼打墙。好，上 explicit 还是讲 content 啊，没办法哈，因为 explicit code 里面呢，你其实还是会遇到非常多接触问题。好，接触的行为就好像就是高度非线性行为，超级不连续嘛哈。好，那对神的问题来讲，接触这件事情就是有时候会变成一件很痛苦的事情，因为你一直找不到到底为什么不熟练的原因哈。但在 explicit 里面通常不太会有这个状况发生，通常不太有这个状况发生。那这张图大家都看过很多次啊，如果你上过基础训练课程呢，有时候 content 就一直看到这个状况。简单来说呢，接触一样，在 explicit 里面呢，跟在 standard 的问题都是2种定义的方式，一种就是 general content。 一种都是 content pairs 啊，没其他梗哈，就是两个哈都一样。好，就是 explicit 还是可以用 general content， 也可以用 content pair 两个都可以用。那第一个就是你不想要说，我不想要去管说到底谁跟谁会接触哈，那所以就全部用 general content。那第二个就是我知道谁会跟谁接触，所以我用 content pairs。然后呢，你会发现我们待会会着重在讲 general content， 原因是因为 explicit 的问题里面呢，你很有可能是完全没有办法遇到谁跟谁会碰在一起，因为撞得乱七八糟。如果你是这种车撞乱七八糟，你哪知道谁会跟谁碰在一起啊？所以后面其实都几乎着重在 general content 这件事情上面。好，那 general content 呢，一般来讲，在设定上绝对会比你做 content pair 来快很多，尤其你的东西一大堆的时候呢，你绝对不可能想要用 content pair 来做。所以 general content 就会变成是在 explicit 很常用的一个方法啊，变成一个方法。好，然后呢，general content 里面呢，它是可以跨 body 嘛，就是你的 content domain 可以跨 body， 那可以包含 rigid， 也可以包含 default。体里面呢，你很有可能是完全没有办法遇到谁跟谁会碰在一起，因为撞得乱七八糟。如果你是这种车撞乱七八糟，你哪知道谁会跟谁碰在一起啊？所以后面其实都几乎着重在 general content 这件事情上面。好，那 general content 呢，一般来讲，在设定上绝对会比你做 content pair 来快很多，尤其你的东西一大堆的时候呢，你绝对不可能想要用 content pair 来做。所以 general content 就会变成是在 explicit 很常用的一个方法啊，变成一个方法。好，然后呢，general content 里面呢，它是可以跨 body 嘛，就是你的 content domain 可以跨 body， 那可以包含 rigid， 也可以包含 default body， 两个都可以，两个都可以。那同时还有个比较特别的东西，其实是 edge to edge content 哈，就是如果你有边的接触的时候呢，其实 general content 会帮你做出比 content pair 来的好的结果，因为它自动帮你找那些边，它自动帮你找那些边。这两个都一样。好，就是 explicit 还是可以用 general content， 也可以用 content pair 两个都可以用。那第一个就是你不想要说，我不想要去管说到底谁跟谁会接触哈，那所以就全部用 general content。那第二个就是我知道谁会跟谁接触，所以我用 content pairs。然后呢，你会发现我们待会会着重在讲 general content， 原因是因为 explicit 的问题里面呢，你很有可能是完全没有办法遇到谁跟谁会碰在一起，因为撞得乱七八糟。如果你是这种车撞乱七八糟，你哪知道谁会跟谁碰在一起啊？所以后面其实都几乎着重在 general content 这件事情上面。好，那 general content 呢，一般来讲，在设定上绝对会比你做 content pair 来快很多，尤其你的东西一大堆的时候呢，你绝对不可能想要用 content pair 来做。所以 general content 就会变成是在 explicit 很常用的一个方法啊，变成一个方法。好，然后呢，general content 里面呢，它是可以跨 body 嘛，就是你的 content domain 可以跨 body， 那可以包含 rigid， 也可以包含 default body， 两个都可以，两个都可以。那同时还有个比较特别的东西，其实是 edge to edge content 哈，就是如果你有边的接触的时候呢，其实 general content 会帮你做出比 content pair 来的好的结果，因为它自动帮你找那些边，它自动帮你找那些边。好，那如果你用 content pair 的话，就没这件事情哈。content pair 就是你得要全部自己定义啊，全部都要自己定义。然后呢，如果你在做 general content 的时候，你某一些地方你已经用了 content pair 的话，那 general content 会避免掉 content pair 的地方。好，基础学可能讲一次，然后 content 讲一次，这边讲一次，好，都是同样的东西。好，如果你在做 general content 的时候，你某一些地方你已经用了 content pair 的话，那 general content 会避免掉 content pair 的地方。好，基础学可能讲一次，然后 content 讲一次，这边讲一次，好，都是同样的东西。好。其实没什么好，所以我们这边待会就是着重讲 general content 这件事情哈。那 general content 就是你想要做的很简单也没问题，就是你从头到尾就是只做一个 general content， 然后只给它一个 general 只给它一个 content property， 然后就结束这一切，绝对没有问题，也可以做。那如果你是说我有一堆东西要接触，那某些东西呢，我希望它跟别的性质不一样，你现在开始定义的越来越复杂的话呢，都可以做得到。就是你想要定义的多复杂，它就可以定义多复杂，只是你想要做很简单，它也可以帮你做很简单哦。好，那所以 wireframing 这已经看到不想看了，我们就继续往后跳。讲一些比较特别的东西哈，就是这个我们之前都在讲，但是那个时候都没有教各位怎么做。就是如果说你遇到的问题呢是为什么特别把 exterior 写出来？就是我们一直在跟各位说 ，general content 它是把所有元素的外表面拿来当做接触的面。那如果你遇到的问题是破坏呢，那表面上的元素就被刮掉了，所以你里面的元素其实没有选到的，其实是没有选到的。这个时候你的 general content 就里面的接触其实是不会碰到的，里面接触其实不会碰到。OK， 那后面就教各位解决这个问题。好，那所以你在做的时候。也要讲什么东西吗？我看一下哦。做 general content 里面有很多东西细项可以调。第一件事情是，当然大家都知道你会调的东西，就是你会去做一个 content property， 那你就会给 global 的，或是你甚至想要给 local， 你想要做一些 individual reflection coefficient 也是可以做得到。那它预设的 content domain 是 all exterior， 就是全部的元素外表面。那你也可以做说，我现在要做的东西不止它，我想要做其他的，或者是单独要谁跟谁接触，或是我不想要某些地方接触，那也可以做 exclude。那另外就是，如果你是 shell， 那 shell 的厚度要不要考量进去？预设是考量进去的哈。如果你不想考量进去的话，你要另外去跟他说你不想考量 shell 的厚度。然后再来就是，如果你有 edge， 如果你有 edge 的话呢，edge 的 criteria。可以告诉他说你要怎样去抓到一个 edge， 好，这我们 content 两个才会讲。好，那因为 general content 实在是太大略了哈，就是 好，因为 general content 实在太大略了哈，你不太可能说你有一个很复杂的模型，然后你想要靠着 general content 打遍天下，然后就跟他说你只要定义一个东西，然后就全部帮我做出来，通常是不太可能的哈。所以 general content 一般来说都会个别定义，都会 define 一些就是特别的 content service 啊，就是你知道说这个 service 跟别人接触的时候状况就是不一样，所以你应该定义一下。好，那这些 service 呢可以跨这些 service， 你想要定义的单独的 service 可以跨 body， 可以跨 body， 就是 general content 已经跨 body 咯，然后你现在还说我现在还想要在就是我里面做了单独的性质，我还想跨 body 也是可以的，也是可以的。那service 可以包含 deformable 跟 rigid。这是不一样的哦。Content pair 是做不到这件事情的 ，Content pair 做不到这件事情的，但是 general content 可以做到这件事情。就你的 service 可以包含的 deformable， 也可以包含 rigid body。OK。然后呢，你的 service 可以是混合的 element type， 这件事情 Content pair 也做不到，这件事情 Content pair 也做不到。好。然后呢，超过2个以上的边要共用同样一个 edge 也是可以的啊，就是这个其实就 T intersection， 就如果你有一个面长得是这样子，就那你说你要选这样的一个面，它可以做得到，好 ，general content 可以做得到。多一点时间。好，那因为为了要定义这些东西哈，你就会发现你有一个困扰，就是你可能做了好几个在 part 上面的面，那做了好几个在 part 上面的面之后呢，因为我们说 surface 跟 set 可以做在 part， 也可以做在 assembly， 那也许你有好几个零件是你要重复组合的，那每一个零件上面你都设定了同样的 surface， 结果这个 surface 你最后想要让它合成一个，好，这时候你可以靠着用 union 的做法，我们开一下 abaqus 给大家看，头像没有开任何东西，有，好，随便，我们什么可以拿出来的东西啊？看一下。好吧，3张打了。Surface， 我没有建 Surface。在模型数里面呢，如果你想要有好多个 Surface， 然后你想要个别去做连集交集的时候呢，比如说像我现在有一件 part 长这样子，那我想要做 Surface 在它上面，比如说也许是这个，然后这个，然后第二个是长这样。等一下，这样。好，有时候在 assembly 里面，你通常会不只丢一个元素，你可能不只丢一个零件。假设我这零件我想要复制好几个，他们的方向都不是我要的。等一下，好，你复制了好几只，那刚刚我们不是在上面建了一些 surface 吗？这时候呢，你的 assembly 里面的 surface 就有好几个，好这样。就是一大堆的 surface， 那因为其实都是同样零件上的 surface。那你在做 general content 的时候，你想要定义这个 domain， 你不太可能说我一个一个去管。好，那也许这一堆东西对我来说其实是一个面，看起来蛮合理的吧？就一堆东西其实看起来应该是一个是面，应该是一个单独的面嘛。好，这时候你可以按右键，然后有个布林，它现在不是叫 union 了，好，现在叫那个布林，好，布林运算。布林运算里面你可以做到的事情就是 union， 就是全部连集。然后第二个东西是插集，不交集了，说交集哈，就这一堆面的交集。然后最后才是插集，插集就是你要先以一个 surface 叫做 first surface， 其他东西去减掉它，好，这东西可以帮助你快速的建出一个新的面，这样你才有办法去好好的去定义你 general content， 好像会比较快一点。好，这是他要讲的东西。 这个东西是插集，插集就是你要先以一个 surface 叫做 first surface， 其他东西去减掉它，去减掉它。好，这东西可以帮助你快速的建出一个新的面，这样你才有办法去好好的去定义你 general content， 好像会比较快一点。好，这是他要讲的东西。这东西是插集，交集了，说交集哈，就这一堆面的交集。然后最后才是插集，插集就是你要先以一个 surface 叫做 first surface， 其他东西去减掉它，去减掉它。好，这东西可以帮助你快速的建出一个新的面，这样你才有办法去好好的去定义你 general content， 好像会比较快一点。好，这是他要讲的东西。 好，那刚刚我们说那个破坏这件事情呢，如果你的东西会坏，那会坏的时候你的 content 会掉，因为预设的 content domain 其实是 all exterior， 只有外表面。那如果你想要连里面，就是你破坏的时候，你里面的元素也要接触啊，这才是正常的状况嘛。好，那这时候要怎么做？好了，在这里哈，那这个时候你要做的事情是，你就变成手动定义好，就是原本的 region， 你看它告诉你说原本的 region 是这里 always self， 对不对？原本的 region always self， 那你现在就变成是你要做第二个，自己去选 surface pair， 自己选 surface pair。那这个 surface pair 呢，你要定义一个面，那定义面的时候的选法跟你平常选的方法可能会不太一样。我们再把这个拿出来给我看一下。好，假如说这个东西会被破坏，那你做 general content 的时候呢，通常原本只抓外表面，然后你现在会破坏的话，你一定要用 mesh 来定义你的 surface， 因为里面会坏，里面剩下的东西就只剩网格，就只有元素。好，那定义的时候是这样定义的，就是定义一个 surface。这时候你没有 geometry 可以选哈，因为你里面东西会坏，你要连 mesh 一起选进来，要选 mesh。好，选 mesh 的时候呢，还有一个特别的事情是这样子，这里选取器里面呢，其实预设的选项呢是 select from exterior entity， 就是只有外面的东西会被选起来。所以当我这样子一次全部圈起来的时候，它其实只选到整个元素的外面，就是里面它其实选不到，里面它其实选不到。OK， 那只是你也看不出来，好，只是你平常状况你也看不出来。
你的牙刷有 AI 吗？飞利浦 AI 智能电动牙刷尊荣上市。
桂格5X30分钟补充能量，6小时好精神，B 群人参浓缩精华饮。
好喽，好，先开到这里，先开到这，好，开了 ，OK。好，里面其中有一堂课叫做 Advanced Topic in abaqus Explicit， 在这里，好，就这个，好，请找到它。然后呢，选择刚刚那个 temp 的路径，就是你的 E temp 或者是 C 或者是 D temp， 我们通常不会装到 C 槽了，可是我自己电脑是不喜欢装 C 槽的。然后开启 abaqus CAE 之后呢，在里面的 plugins， 然后有个 tools。 然后有个 install clauses， 对，好喽，好，先开到这里，先开到这，好，开啦 ，OK。好，里面其中有一堂课叫做 Advanced Topic in abaqus Explicit， 在这里，好，就这个，好，请找到它。然后呢，选择刚刚那个 temp 的路径，就是你的 E temp 或者是 C 或者是 D temp， 我们通常不会装到 C 槽，可是我自己电脑是不喜欢装到 C 槽的。好，选那个资料夹，把你要装的路径先给它，然后选择 Advanced Topic in abaqus Explicit， 然后 OK。好，那这时候你就会，因为我其实已经有了哈，这时候你就会看到你的在你的那个。你刚刚选对了，底下会出现一个 Advanced Explicit， 好 ，Advanced Explicit 这边。好了，但我们要做的全部都是 Interactive 的版本，就是abaqus 会分成 Interactive 跟 Keyword 两个版本。Interactive 就是用 CAE 做 ，Keyword 就是用 MP 做。好，那我们都用 CAE 做，好，所以 Interactive 版本。好，所以里面会有这6项，好，这是待会要用的东西。好，有人装课程遇到困难吗？好，没有了，那就继续喽。好，所以请你先把工作路径设到你刚才做好的这个 Advanced Explicit Interactive， 然后 Bushing 底下，好，切到 Bushing 底下。然后等一下，我先开个新专案。好，所以做分析嘛，永远都一样哈。第一件 FCA 第一件要你做的事情就是，请你一定要记得要设工作路径，好，请你一定要记得设工作路径。然后工作路径呢设在刚才你找到的这个 explicit 啊，不好意思，按错了，这里 explicit interactive， 然后 pushing，OK， OK。好，那由于 abaqus 不同的版本之间的点 CAE 档呢，旧版开不了新版，然后新版可以开旧版，但是需要 update 啊，所以其实官方在放这些课程的时候都不是放 CAE 档，他们都放脚本档。好，所以请你执行一下脚本档，好，在 file 这边有一个 run script， 好，然后选择这个有一个 ws advanced explicit bushing 点 py 档，它其实是个 Python 的 command，OK， 然后所以它就自动帮你把这个模型给做好，然后帮你，忘记会不会存那个点 CAE， 然后总之就是会帮你做好，好，就涨价。好，它会帮你快速的用好这个模型。好，所以这个模型大概长这样子。那好，文档这里，让你做在刚才就自己啊，不好意思，按错了，这里 explicit interactive， 然后 pushing，OK， 就是那个它当然不会装到 C 槽了，可是我自己电脑是不喜欢装到 C 槽的。刚刚 topic in abaqus explicit 在这里，好，就这个，好，请找到它。然后呢，选择刚刚那个 temp 的路径，就是你的 E temp 或者是 C 或者是 D temp， 我们通常不会装到 C 槽了，可是我自己电脑是不喜欢装到 C 槽的。好，选那个资料夹，把你要装的路径先给它，然后选择 Advanced 它。topic in abaqus explicit， 那 OK， 好，那这时候你就会，因为我其实已经有了哈，这时候你就会看到你的在你的那个。你刚刚选对了，底下会出现一个 Advanced Explicit， 好 ，Advanced Explicit 这边。好了，但我们要做的全部都是 Interactive 的版本，就是abaqus 会分成 Interactive 跟 Keyword 两个版本。Interactive 就是用 CAE 做 ，Keyword 就是用 MP 做。好，那我们都用 CAE 做，好，所以 Interactive 版本。好，所以里面会有这6项，好，这是待会要用的东西。 好，有人装课程有遇到困难吗？好，没有了，好，那就继续喽。好，所以请你先把工作路径设到你刚才做好的这个 Advanced Explicit Interactive， 然后 Bushing 底下，好，切到 Bushing 底下。然后等一下，我先开个新专案。好，所以做分析嘛，永远都一样。好，第一件 FCA 第一件要你做的事情就是，请你一定要记得要设工作路径。好，请你一定要记得设工作路径。然后工作路径呢，设在刚才你找到的这个 Explicit 啊，不好意思，按错了，这里 Explicit Interactive， 然后 Bushing。OK。OK， 好，那由于 abaqus 不同的版本之间的点 .ca 档呢，旧版开不了新版，然后新版可以开旧版的需要 update 啊，所以其实官方在放这些课程的时候都不是放 .ca 档，他们都放脚本档，好，所以请你执行一下脚本档，好，在 file 这边有一个 run script， 好，然后选的这个有一个 ws advanced explicit bushing 点 py 档，好，它其实是个 Python command，OK， 然后所以它就自动帮你把这个模型给做好，然后帮你。忘记要不会存那个点 .ca， 然后总之就是会帮你做好。好，就长这样。好，它会帮你快速的用好这个模型。好，所以这个模型大概长这样子。那好，那我们就开始去做它现在里面的东西哈。你现在看到的它其实有3个零件啊，总共有3件零件哈，就是外面这边有一圈，然后绿色的部分是一件，然后白色的部分是一件 ，OK 啊。好，然后其实它已经帮你做了好多设定哈，这些设定包括了，其实帮你做好的态。好，它其实很简单，就是这3件东西它其实抬在一起的哈，就是中间这件它跟绿色抬在一起，然后绿色的呢再跟外面的红色的一圈抬在一起啊，其实它就全部连在一起。然后boundary condition也帮，总共有3件零件哈，就是外面这边有一圈，然后绿色的部分是一件，然后白色的部分是一件 ，OK 啊。好，然后其实它已经帮你做了好多设定哈，这些设定包括了，其实帮你做好的态。好，它其实很简单，就是这3件东西它其实抬在一起的哈，就是中间这件它跟绿色抬在一起，然后绿色的呢再跟外面的红色的一圈抬在一起啊，其实它就全部连在一起。然后
We identified the contact for T3 with a general contact interactions. Avoids processing interactions which history output variable. If highlight selected regions, we must
牙龈问题让我睡不好，工作不顺。牙周式深入口腔死角，60秒内扫除超过50%牙菌斑，牙龈照顾好，生活没烦恼。
This is Subway， 新鲜现做，你的独特风味。
And now the fun starts regarding this episode begins, interaction. I said, yeah, surface to surface, and as you can see, because it's a 2D simulation, we cannot use general contact, we have to use surface to surface contact. And now create the surface, the master surface. We check the rigid punch because it is rigid, and now it chooses a side for the edges. I find this a bit misleading, however it means basically which side of this one-dimensional wire, so to say, will be in contact for the contact that you just define, and it's basically just the yellow one. Choose the slave type. Let's choose surface here, because this is basically just for the whether it's a node set or a true surface. I said at least one must be a surface, but both can be a surface. So that's the slave. Here you see the discretization method, surface to surface, node to surface, finite sliding, small sliding. Go for finite sliding. Let's start with surface to surface. Some other stuff you can define which we didn't talk about, some interference fits. So if you have some initial penetration, how is this resolved before the actual simulation starts and stuff. However, you can now further define the contact interaction property. A new one is created by clicking on this icon, and here you have even more options than what we've already talked about. In metal forming, I would say the contact is what you are interested in most of the time. So now here, this is how it looks. I think you've seen this in the first tutorial. Most important, always define a normal behavior. Here you have the pressure overclosure formulations. You see that looks familiar. And here you have the constraint and forcing method. By default, you
然后 boundary condition 也帮你做好了。好 ，boundary condition 就是底下是 symmetric， 好，底下是对称面，好 ，y 轴对称，然后中间的 reference point 呢是固定的，好，中间 reference 是固定的。那固定的那个是 outer， 就是外面红色这一圈的 RP 点，好，外面这一圈红色 RP 点。那红色的这一件没有记错的话，应该是设成了 rigid body 吗？好像没有，应该是没有。看一下，应该是没有。OK， 好，大概是这样。OK， 那我们从 step 开始做好，所以我们现在只是让各位练习，你现在要做一个 quasi-static 的分析的时候，你大概怎么做这些东西。好，在你讲义的 W3.3 的位置，我们从3.3这张开始做。W3.3 应该在相当的后面，好，第3章最后的，翻到最后是 burst strike， 然后再往前一个，好，再往前一个范例。好，那我们一开始先做这个分析呢，我们做超级快的分析，所以他打算 step 呢，一开始这个地方呢，做一个 dynamic explicit， 然后呢 time period 只有 0.5 个 millisecond， 所以就是5乘以10的负4次方的意思，怎么想？好，那他告诉你说，因为这个分析其实真实的分析是2分钟，也就是120秒，那它现在等于是等于是24万倍的速度，好，这里是24万倍的速度，好，超级快 ，OK。 好，那我们一开始先做这个分析呢，我们做超级快的分析，所以他打算 step 呢，一开始这个地方呢做一个 dynamic explicit， 然后呢 time period 只有 0.5 个 millisecond， 所以就是5乘以10的负4次方的意思，怎么想？好，5乘以10的负4次 time period 只有 0.5 个 millisecond， 所以就是5乘以10的负4次方的意思，怎么想？好，那他告诉你说，因为这个分析其实真实的分析是2分钟，也就是120秒，那它现在等于是等于是24万倍的速度，好，这里是24万倍的速度，好，超级快 ，OK。好，时间就这么小，好，时间就这么小。好 ，OK。那同时呢，在 history output 的地方 ，history output 的地方，它要多 request 一个 energy 叫做 ALLDC 这个。好。
Give abaqus the option. Sometimes it.
这个东西是能量消散，因为 distortion control 的能量消散，好，原本是没有开的，所以把它打开。好，这东西在这里，先把 manager 打开了哈，然后这边，好，就是现有的那一个，然后多把 ALLDC 勾起来。OK。好，然后呢，多做一组历史分析。我现在在 W3.3 的第3点，好，在第3点，多做一个新的 history output， 然后在 step 1 continue。这时候 domain 呢，选择它已经帮你做好的 set， 叫做 inner shift，inner reference，inner reference， 就是里面的这个RP 点。好，那它 request 要的东西是包括了 translation and rotation， 好，它想要平移跟旋转的输出。然后 reaction force， 所以是 RF 的 reaction force 跟 reaction moment， 好，所以就是2个，可以吗？好，就是 U 全部勾起来，然后 RF 全部勾起来，好，这2个 ，OK。好，所以你现在你有2组的历史输出哈。然后接着呢，他跟你说，因为这个东西呢，相对于 shift 跟外面的 outer， 里面现在这个材质呢，比外面跟里面都来的软很多，所以他打算把里面跟外面都算成钢体，好，让你算的比较快一点。好，所以我们现在要做 rigid body。那这2个东西一开始有 deform over part 嘛，好，那所以我们现在就做 rigid body constraint， 在 interaction 里面，然后好 create constraint， 有个 rigid body。好，那你可以帮它取名字。第一个是你希望它是里面的inner rigid， 你希望里面它是变压体。所以 inner rigid， 然后 rigid body continue， 然后 domain 选择在它的 body 的部分呢，选择在 inner 有做好的 set 里面有一个 inner 这个 set。如果你没有开到这个视窗的话，是它在这里啊。如果你一开始的画面长这样，这里有个 set， 然后 inner 这里。好，所以 body 的部分选这里，让 inner 这一整块都变成钢体。Continue。那既然你要设成钢体，钢体就要有参考点哈，所以参考点这里要设，所以 reference point 呢这个地方选择用 edit。那也做好了 set 哈，我们也建好 set， 所以选 set 就好了 ，set， 然后选择 inner reference， 好了，我帮你传边边直接选，好 continue。好，所以做起来是这样子哈，这是 edit constraint 的样子，这个是 inner rigid， 好，这是 inner rigid， 就让里面变成 rigid body constraint， 然后让它变钢体。OK， 好，就这样子哦。好，这同样的 outer 哈，我就快一点哦，再做一个 outer， 这边就不知道大家大小写了 ，outer rigid， 然后一样做 rigid body constraint， 选择 outer 这个 geometry， continue， 然后一样要选参考点，参考点选择 outer reference， 好了，就这样子。所以里面跟外面的做法是一样的哈，就只是选一个选 inner， 一个选 outer， 好 ，inner 跟 outer。OK 吗？好，就长这样啊。OK， 所以你应该现在的 constraint manager 里面会有4个哈，就是前面它2个帮你先做好了 type， 就是它粘在一起。那后面这2个就是你刚刚做好 rigid body constraint。嗨，请说。这2个 reference point 可以设在同一个 inner 和 outer， 不 inner 和 outer。我想一下哦。因为现在是分开嘛。这样会不会 over constraint？ 想一下，应该不会，应该可以这样做，但是我不太清楚会变怎样，你可以试看看。反正你会用嘛，你就用看看。好。第一个分析要做完了哈，我们先把它做完，再下课。如果有问题，那下课我再解决。然后接下来就是要做 content 嘛，哈，因为刚才我们还没有做 content 哈，所以我们现在做一个 content。那最简单的问题就是这东西有够麻烦，不知道怎么做 content general content 好不好？所以直接在 interaction 里面左上角第一颗按键是 create interaction， 然后做 general content explicit。那你想放 initial 放 step 1都可以啦，因为其实这题其实影响不大。然后做一个 general content， 然后呢，因为现在还没有 interaction property， 那就给它一个 interaction property， 从这里做 create interaction property， 然后 create 一个 content 的 interaction property， 然后名字就随便取了哈，我取 frictionless 好了，就是他现在想要做一个完全没有摩擦的 frictionless。好，完全没有摩擦的 content property， 其实你什么都不需要给哈，你就给一个空白的 content property 就好了，它等于就是 frictionless 然后 hard content， 你就这样子给它就好了。OK， 什么都不用给，就做一个，就做一组 content property， 然后是空的就可以了。但是你不能不做哈，一定要做哈，一定要做哈，就是你可以给它空的，但是你不能不给它哈。好 ，OK， 就 general content 就结束了哈，非常简单的 general content， 就是只有一个 frictionless 的 content property 就没了，好就没了。好，那我们主要有位移吧。好，所以这一题的分析呢，它是会抓着中间的 inner shift 去inner shift 的 reference point， 然后去做旋转跟位移。好，所以你不能够把它放在 inner shift， 因为 inner shift 它会动。对，好，所以还是要分开，还是要分开。好，那你 define 你现在想要做位移的时候呢，就会立刻遇到一个问题是这样子。好，如果你现在想要做 displacement rotation， 好，这个在 load 模组里面的这一颗好 create boundary condition， 你现在想要做的时候呢，就会立刻遇到一个问题是，我先随便选。好 ，amplitude 是什么？你现在没有给 amplitude 哈，因为 amplitude 你不给它的话 ，explicit 里面的 amplitude 预设是 instantaneous， 就是立刻移到那个位置，然后就结束了。好，所以我们不是要这样子哈，你现在想要做的是 quasi-static 分析。那我们前面刚最后那张 summary 红字上面我写的东西就是 use smooth step。好，所以请你做一个 smooth step。好，现在做 smooth step。你想要做 amplitude 的方式呢，就 就是左边的模型数有一个 amplitude， 你可以点2下，这是一种做法。另外一个就是在上面的 tools 有一个 amplitude， 这里也可以 create， 这2个做法都是可以的。好，这2个做法都是可以的。好，做 amplitude 呢有一个就叫做 smooth step， 它其实不是一个分析步，它是一个 amplitude， 它是一个 amplitude。好，做一个 amplitude 叫做 smooth step， 然后你的曲线可以叫做 smooth， 随便这取名字而已哈。好 ，continue。好，做 explicit 分析的 amplitude 的时候，你就要小心一件事情哈。左边我们现在都要讲一般的时间域哈，我们没有讲 frequency 的，我们没有讲频率域。左边的时间跟右边的 amplitude 呢，因为时间会随着你不同的 case， 你就会变。因为像现在刚刚这个分析，我们刚不是说我们做的是5个 millisecond 吗？0.5 millisecond， 所以它的打法是这样子哦，是0 0，就是在时间0的时候，你 amplitude 是0，然后时间是5乘以10的负4次方的时候，你的 amplitude 要是1，就是要加载完成哈，就是要加载完成。好，那一旦你后来你现在想要做另外的分析，然后你的时间改变的时候，你就要来记得改你的 amplitude 哦，因为你的时间就改变了，你 amplitude 就不适用了，你就要改现在这个位置的这个时间，因为你的整体的分析时间就变了。这个东西在 standard 通常不是问题，因为 standard 你的时间通常是1，好，因为那是个时间增量。好，就这样子 ，OK。好，做好了之后，你就可以来做你的 boundary condition 了。好，所以我们现在来做一个 boundary condition。好，这个 boundary condition 呢，就在 inner shift inner reference 上面。我们现在想让 inner shift 可以移动跟转动，好，所以就是因为它是钢体的，所以你控制参考点就可以了。好 ，inner shift inner reference， 然后 continue。好，这里呢，它是让1方向的位移，我们看一下哈。其实没什么好，所以我们这边待会就是着重讲 general context 这件事情哈。那 general context 就是你想要做的很简单也没问题，就是你从头到尾就是只做一个 general， 也做不了这件事情的，但是 general context 可以做到这件事情，就你的surface 可以包含的 deformable， 也可以包含 rigid body。OK， 然后呢，你的 surface 可以是混合的 element type， 这件事情 counterpart 也做不到，这件事情 counterpart 也做不到。好，然后呢，超过2个以上的边要共用同样一个 edge 也是可以的啊，就是这个其实就是 T intersection， 就如果你有一个面长得是这样子。那你说你要选这样的一个面才可以做得到，好，general context可以做得到。多一点时间。好，那因为为了要定义这些东西哈，你就会发现你有一个困扰，就是你可能做了好几个在 part 上面的面，那做了好几个在 part 上面的面之后呢，因为我们说 surface 跟 set 可以做在 part， 也可以做在 assembly， 那也许
predict appropriate internal pressure. As you can see in this figure, we are modeling tube hydroforming process and we know the final diameter of the tube. We want to predict appropriate internal pressure to create this diameter. We will use an iterative method by Python scripting and running several jobs to find the appropriate pressure. At the first video of this series, we modeled tube hydroforming and we will use this CAE file in this video. That is the Python code for iterative solving the inverse finite element modeling. At the beginning of this file, we can see some modules which are imported and we will use them later. Then we have the target displacement of the tube. This target displacement means that we have 25% increase in the tube diameter. The next line is a tolerance, which shows how accurate we want to reach to this target. For iterative solution of this problem, we use Newton iterative method. In this method, at first we assume that displacement is a function of pressure, and we want to reach to a target displacement by finding the pressure. In the next step, we approximate the displacement by its current value plus its derivation with relation to pressure multiplied by pressure correction. And then we can calculate pressure correction as you can see in this relation. After that, we can write the difference between target and current displacement as residual and rewrite the pressure correction relation based on residual. Now the main challenge for using these relations in our code is that we don't have an explicit function between pressure and displacement. Therefore, we cannot calculate the derivation of the function. We can approximate the derivation of the function if we have 2 points of the function. As you can see in this relation, we need 2 points to calculate the slope of the function. The first point can be the point 0 and 0, and for the second point, we should perform a job before running this script. After that, we calculate the residual, which is the difference between our target and our current displacement. The next line, open the CAE file, which is from our first video of this series, and after that, we start a while body to calculate the appropriate pressure iteratively. At first, we open a text file. Working with text file was also described in one of the videos of this series, and then we calculate the residual. After that, we calculate the slope of the function by 2 points, and also we calculate the correction of the pressure. We keep the old pressure, and also we update the pressure by calculated correction. In the next step, we change the CAE model by putting the new pressure in the load module. If we are interested to keep all of the ODB files, we should change the name of the job at each iteration. So we add a number to the name of the job and update it in each iteration. After submitting the job in this line, in the next line, we should wait for job to be completed. Before going through the Python code, the job should be completed because we want to read from the output file. In the next step, we open the ODB file. As it is described in our previous video, we can find displacement of desired point by reading from the ODB file. This parameter contains the vector of displacement in a desired point, which is the middle of the tube and shows its final diameter. And we want the first component, which is in x direction. We keep the old displacement and use this new displacement also in new parameter. Then we write iteration number, applied pressure, and predicted displacement to our file. And finally we close the file and add a number to the number of iteration. In summary, in this while body, until reaching to the desired displacement by the tolerance, we guess a pressure with 2 previous points and iterative method, and then use this pressure to run the problem another time and calculate the displacement. We save displacement and pressure in a text file and use them in the next iteration. Now we can go to the abaqus environment and run the script. Now we only run the script and can see the progress of the iterative method. We could see here that after 5 iterations and running 5 jobs, our iterative procedure has completed, and now we can go to our text file. We could see that the text file has been created in the defined directory. We open the text file. We can now see the progress of our iterative. Method. In the first iteration, the predicted pressure caused a displacement larger than the target, and in the next iteration, the pressure is reduced and the displacement is relatively close to our target, which was 2.5. Job. Our iterative procedure has completed, and now we can go to our text file. We could see that the text file has been created in the defined directory. We open the text file. We can now see the progress of our iterative method. In the first iteration, the predicted pressure caused a displacement larger than the target, and in the next iteration, the pressure is reduced and the displacement is relatively close to our target, which was 2.5. And in the fourth and fifth iterations, we exactly reached to the target displacement. I hope you guys has enjoyed this video. If this video has helped you out, please let us know by a like, a comment, or a subscribe. See you in the next videos.
In this video I will show you the steps to create a simple iteration in abaqus CAE. The example is shown here. We will create a cylindrical shell, then perform an iteration with different imperfection types, in this example eigenmode and dimple imperfections, and then we also will create a script which gives us the corresponding results. The problem description is here. We have a cylindrical shell under axial compression. Here is the material and the overall geometry, and here is a corresponding article. Okay. In the next part we will look into the abaqus model creation. In this part of the video we will create a numerical model. First we start in abaqus, rename this to LBA, then we go to parts, shell extrusion, create circle, center and perimeter, and first point is 0 and 0. Second point is 0, now 33 and 0. Okay, and then extrusion 100.
开瓶原萃抽机票。
And we select
After in the Python scripting is that now we use strings and number. These three types a plot float of an integer which is 1 and it becomes a real.
牙龈问题让我睡不好，工作不顺，牙周式深入口腔死角，60秒内扫除超过50%牙菌斑，牙龈照顾好，生活没烦恼。
开瓶原萃抽机票，喝日本茶，游日本去。
Hello everyone, I'm Reza Tangisani, and in this video I'm gonna give you some simple example to learn Python. In this video I'm gonna give you 3 methods to learn. One of them is using JNL file, the other one is using microfile, and the last one is using print comment in the abaqus. Okay, starting with JNL file. This method is very simple, and personally I use this method to learn developing code with Python in abaqus. For this purpose we need to create a very simple and you need to rename it. For example, delete this command and then here the exact same size for the part, everything. So you can use that code for creating model. For example, if I again create another model, empty model, and then I delete these commands, then in here I again run the Python code, I'm gonna see the part, but for property, the last one is using print comment. This method is very simple, and personally I use this method to learn developing code with Python in abaqus. For this purpose we need to create a very simple set our directory file. So here set the Python folder to another file, as you can see in here, the Python folder. And then I'm gonna create a very simple model. For example, I'm gonna create a part in here. Okay, and after that I'm gonna assign some material property. Then I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna call it example. Okay, and then in my folder I can see a CAE file and JNF file. If you cannot see the file name extension, then you need to copy it and then you need to rename it. For example, change the what is this code. For example, if I create another new model and run a script in here, run a script, and then use this Python file, I can see the whole thing that I just created. The material property, here